Ladies and gentlemen, we have some breaking news here for PlayStation Studios. We have two studio closures, which is never fun news to go over, but something that we thought was a very real possibility as Firewalk Studios, they're shutting down, and also Neon Koi as well, which maybe not as obvious, but that would probably add up with what we've seen from that studio, which is quite frankly nothing. So confirmed over on the PlayStation blog, or rather the SIE blog, I should say, an update from PlayStation Studios. So for Neon Koi, they say, and I quote here, "While mobile games remain a priority growth area for the studio business, we are in the very early stage of our mobile efforts. To achieve success in this area, we need to concentrate on titles that are in line with PlayStation Studios' pedigree and have the potential to reach players more globally. With this refocused approach, Neon Koi will close, and its mobile action game will not be moving forward. I want to express my gratitude to everyone at Neon Koi for their hard work and endless passion to innovate." Now, as for Firewalk, of course, the studio behind Concord, they say, and I quote here, "After much thought, we've determined the best path forward is to permanently sunset the game and close the studio. I want to thank all of Firewalk for their craftsmanship, creative spirit, and dedication. The PvP first-person shooter genre is a competitive space that's continuously evolving, and unfortunately, we did not hit our targets with this title. We will take the lessons learned from Concord and continue to advance our live service capabilities to deliver future growth in this area." Perhaps the most noteworthy line there, given that this is not going to slow down the company at all when it comes to developing and making more live service titles. And this is sort of what we've discussed many times over, which is the company's just... This isn't going to dissuade them per se, but it is going to be some hard lessons learned for this genre that Sony is underrepresented in. It's still something where I'm not into these games. A lot of you watching these videos might not be into these games, but if I were a very big Sony shareholder, I'd want the company to be investing in this area. So it's not going to stop them per se, but they are, going down this long, hard road of learning just how difficult this stuff is, because so many things can be said about what went wrong with Concord. And so, we already saw a late 2023 portfolio culling, and that had some cancellations in there. Now we've got this, which the Neon Koi game was also probably going to have some element of, live service monetization and things like that. We still don't really know at all what that game was going to be, which, if I'll be honest, I think that's maybe the more fascinating thing to look at here, because with Concord and Firewalk, right? I mean, again, many things can be said. We've talked about this studio and this game so many times, and nothing has really changed here outside of just now we finally have the end result, which is Firewalk is being shuttered. And that's not the result I would have wanted. If we dial back to the conversation me and John had on Click R3, it was a matter of okay, so bringing back Concord is not really going to be a good idea, given that even if you do make it free to play, that's not going to change anything. It looks like a completely competent first-person shooter that has sci-fi elements and asymmetric gameplay, and it pound for pound it was probably a very sort of bog standard game that was fine. Just in this kind of environment, that's not good enough, and if it's being labeled as derivative, that's another problem, and the game just had a certain image that there was no way it was going to get over it. At a certain point, it was just insurmountable with the kind of coverage and image the game had, right? So having said that, bringing it back free to play, whether it's through Plus or straight up free to play, it's just not going to happen. Unrealistic. There's really, I think, no path there, and the company clearly came to the same conclusion. On the flip side, though, I mean, there's still ways to sort of salvage that, which is, are you going to really bankroll the game in a manner where you're going to relabel it and completely redo assets? That's maybe the most unrealistic option, but maybe one that they did consider. The other aspect is what you do with all that talent at Firewalk, the studio that you acquired for this game over a very long-term period where, we saw the development process, them working with Probably Monsters. They were also an early investor in the game as well, same with some co-founders and I think some venture capitalists. Because again, the whole $400 million number thing is still out there. That's not confirmed, and there's still many stakeholders that were involved in making that game. But the point is, Sony got involved at some point and saw the game all the way through to finance it. So there was some commitment with that studio itself, Firewalk. So that's still a team of talented people that you could, in theory, do something with. But the point I made at the time on Click R3 was, okay, you let them do, say, another game, this demon is going to chase them. And is that really something where you want to go 5, 6, 7 years? Then Firewalk announces another game, and the same thing happens, even though whatever this new game is, you've got headlines, YouTube thumbnails, the Kotaku article, IGN stuff left and right, because that's an easy headline to write. The Concord studio, here's their new game, and that's the same insurmountable challenge that the studio now has to face. Right? Even if you rename them, it's still the same location, same studio, same team members. Like, it's, we all, I think, know how that might go down, and I think that was another option Sony considered, and so that probably didn't play out all that well either. Maybe, retaining that staff, moving them around. If you're going to dissolve the studio, I think that would maybe be the best course of action. Sounds like that may or may not be happening here. We'll talk more about any sort of details that are cleared up on LTPS this coming Friday. But they could be a support studio as well. The problem with doing support studios, that's not what all these people signed up for when they started working at the studio, and it just might not really fit into the pipeline for what Sony is doing across all these different games and everything. I mean, there's just a logistic issue with assigning all those people and the entire studio into a support role. So this was, I hate to say it, probably the best. I don't want to say best, but it was probably one of the more viable options from SIE's point of view, which I still don't really think is great news. I don't want to see anybody lose their jobs, no matter what the actual circumstance was. Now, Neon Koi, though, yeah, this one is pretty fascinating. That this was Sony's, I guess from the outside looking in, they're most committed to finally shipping like a competent mobile game, since the complaint I've always had with Sony and mobile games is that they seem to throw a bunch of different like IP and things at the wall to see what sticks, and they'll always contract this stuff out, obviously, or have there's some studios that are well known that have done some of these mobile versions as well, like Run Sackboy Run and everything, but it's just still a bunch of things that I think don't really resonate or land with the mobile audience in a big way, and certainly not the way Sony expects them to. So it was actually, in a way, encouraging. Now, I'm not a mobile person, really. I play a lot of Pokemon Go, but that's the IP's carrying that game. Not really a mobile person. But, following and analyzing and covering the PlayStation business, I would love to see them actually make a genuine attempt at investing in that space where I think you really do have to go about it in a different way. This is the first time where Sony was seemingly doing that, which is establishing a completely separate PlayStation Studios mobile division, hiring specialized staff that have been in mobile for a long time, appointing the former Apple Arcade boss, Nicolas Sebastiani. Then they left. The studio actually that they acquired were originally called Savage Game Studios. Then they were renamed. You had some founders leaving, I think, and a number of key staff leaving. So it sounds like that project maybe was going through some turmoil, and maybe they weren't really hitting some big milestone builds. And so there's some issues going on with that game, clearly, to where we are now. We really never even saw what that game was or what it was going to be. Especially because, in today's environment, a lot of mobile games will have that synergy with console versions as well, kind of like a Genshin Impact or a Fortnite or something, right? Where you've got an in-game economy that you can, and this cross-progression you can do between console and PC. So I thought maybe that's what they're doing with this game, but that's just not the case. Well, console, PC, mobile, I should say, since we're, again, not going to see this game. But Neon Koi was their first mobile studio acquisition for this newly established PlayStation Studios mobile division, and now that's not going forward, so it sounds like they're still committed to that, but it sounds like it's now very far away for whatever they end up doing with their mobile efforts. I guess if they are, looking to have some studios in-house, now they're back down to 0. So they might, I guess, continue acquiring studios. I don't know. I mean, it's that was also during a time where the studio was on a merger and acquisition spree. Money was cheap back then. So it's kind of insane waking up to this, to have two of these announcements. And Firewalk, I think, was, this was probably a very recent decision too, given that leading up to this, we just had no indication from anybody chasing down the story or something. Usually we can figure out exactly what is probably going to end up happening, but in this case, it sounds like it was probably a pretty recent decision. A lot of the existing Firewalk staff were already in a position of I think the studio is going to get closed down. I might as well stick it out to the very end and then collect some kind of severance, which is now likely what's going to be playing out. But with that said, wanted to get a very quick conversation out. We'll talk more on LTPS when this news sort of I guess the dust settles, I'm sure we'll get more details as this stuff wraps up, and we'll also be having a Click R3 episode fairly soon as well, so me and John will be talking more about this. So having said that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. You take it easy.